Love is Blind. Season 8, let's watch.
And then letting you boss me around.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
That's what I like. In the bedroom, anything like a guy's like into and you're like, okay, weirdo.
No. I mean, I'm like pretty open to trying anything once.
I am too.
So.
If you're into it,
Yeah.
I'm trainable.
Okay. I have no idea. We're just seeing these tiny little snippets and it's edited, but often the editors will include things as a precursor of things to come, foreshadowing. So I don't know, but that little bit there made me wonder if Dave, at the very least, has some kinks that he's into. Nothing wrong with that. But given the other things we saw from him, is this also potentially going to be a sign of some problems in the future? I don't know. Doesn't seem likely because that's not the sort of stuff they get into. But in the last season, remember Steven and Monica, right? Woof. Yeesh. Yikes. Double yikes. Triple yikes. And if so with Dave, then my goodness, we are looking at... Did you ever watch Heroes, the TV show? And Siler? He was this bad guy superhero who could open people's heads and take their superpowers. And by the end of, particularly in the season 2, which was terrible, he had all these different powers and was a villain. And I wonder if Dave is like Siler in that he's several villains from past seasons of Love is Blind rolled up into one. Which is a ridiculous thing to say halfway through the first episode. So who knows? But they're including it in the edits. There have been some... by the way, he said, because we saw in the edit that he asked 3 women, and maybe more, probably more, that question, why are you here? What's wrong with you? You're like, okay, well, maybe that's a bit of a joke. And then another thing that we saw in the edit that he joked once, in which he said, I have an OnlyFans. Pause. Just joking. And he told Molly that he did that with several, if not every person that he was dating. So I don't know. It's just another data point.
How your parents loved you as a kid. That's your vision of love, and that's what you're looking for.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so how did your parents show you love, Dave?
Oh my God. They were always making sure I wasn't making dumb decisions or hanging out with the wrong crowd.
What's your sibling situation?
I have an...
All right, so that was edited funny. Let's rewatch that. The way that it looked was, in the edit anyway, she asks him a question. They've been talking about how, she said that her dad is named Dave or David. They were talking about how their childhood and their parents, the way that they loved each other and the way that they showed love is a template for how you might seek or not seek love as an adult, which is generally true according to research. It's hard to lock that down with empirical data, but there's a mountain of evidence along those lines, depending on what you're asking. But anyway, so then she directly asks him, how did your parents show you love? And I'm like, oh, yes, Lauren, thank you for asking that question. And then let's rewind that.
Love in your romantic relationships from how your parents loved you as a kid. That's your vision of love, and that's what you're looking for.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so how did your parents show you love, Dave?
Oh my God. They were always making sure I wasn't making dumb decisions or hanging out with the wrong crowd.
What's your sibling situation?
Sometimes they will Frankenstein edit a scene because there's a lot of things that are being said over a number of dates and they're trying to tell a story and they don't want to have to show a whole other scene. So they take something or later in the conversation and they insert it because it kind of had that look, even had that sound to it. The timbre of his voice was different when he answered the question. So it looked inserted. Now, sometimes the editors and the storytellers are Frankensteining something together because it's an accurate representation of the individual or the events. There are times when they edit things where it's not that, like with Jackie in season 4, when they completely edited it to make it look like she was cheating in a sense, and even Marshall was saying that that was false. But usually on the show, compared to other shows, my sense is, I can't know, but after talking with a lot of the cast members, and what we see is pretty close to what actually happened. I think there's enough real drama happening on the show that they don't have to fabricate things. Other shows, it's pretty clear that they are fabricating things. Like there are certain episodes or scenes or couples on 90 Day Fiancé where it seems and has been confirmed, my dogs are barking, I don't know if you hear that, that the editors and storytellers, and sometimes even the cast members themselves, are completely fabricating things. So, having said all that, what we heard him say, which I wrote down, which I think is important, is, at least in the edit, she asks, how did your parents show you love? And he says, my parents were always making sure I wasn't making dumb decisions or hanging out with the wrong crowd. So that's completely consistent, or seemingly consistent, with what he was saying earlier regarding his mom. In the midst of talking about his mom dying, he said, my mom was very hard on me about doing the right thing, like having integrity, and I haven't always had that. I was wondering what he meant by integrity. That wasn't clarified. In this context, I wonder if I speculated it had to do with telling the truth, because that's typically what people are referring to. And I'm guessing that this is more along those lines of, you have a teenager that is breaking rules, staying out past curfew, is skipping school, or getting into drugs and alcohol or whatever. And the parents are concerned and are wanting to talk with their kid about it. And the kid will say, no, it wasn't me. No, the teacher, is lying or whatever. And, well, geez, now that I go down this road, so I wouldn't be surprised if, at the very least, he went through a period of time in his adolescence in which he was lying a lot. I don't know. It kind of sounds like he's saying that. Now, maybe it was just the regular range of lying. All teenagers, for the most part, will lie at times, right? I mean, I lied to my parents when I was a teenager, not extensively, but, if I was going to a party and I wasn't sure if my parents, and there weren't going to be any parents at the house party, then I wouldn't tell my parents that, typically. My parents were pretty lax about that kind of stuff, so I might have told them, but probably not. I just wouldn't mention it. So it's lying by omission, right? That's not okay. I'm not proposing that's what you're supposed to do, but teenagers are going to teenage. So there could be just that, and that's what he's talking about. Does it sound like it? He seemed, at the age of 32, those are the first thing, or one of the first things that he talks about when he talks about his parents, is that they wanted to talk to them about having integrity. He says, my mom was really hard on me about doing the right thing, like having integrity. I haven't always had that. My parents were always making sure I wasn't making dumb decisions or hanging out with the wrong crowd. So who knows? But it could indicate not only that he was lying excessively and not in the way that typical teenagers will lie, but maybe that he had been lying about various things, has a tendency for lying, which is total speculation. But I will say, independent of Dave, there's this thing that we call antisocial personality, or we will call psychopathy. Some people on the internet will call it sociopathy. That is a clinical term. It's a term in psychology that we will use in research at times. Typically, though, when we're talking about what the internet will call sociopath, in my field and among experts like myself, we will either be using the term antisocial personality disorder, or we're talking about psychopathy or psychopathic personality disorder, which isn't in the DSM, but you get, and there's different ways of defining psychopathy. But anyway, point is that these individuals, one, tend not to have empathy, or they have severely reduced empathy for other people, meaning they don't care about other people's feelings, they don't care about other people's misfortune or pain or discomfort or harm. It doesn't necessarily mean they themselves want to cause harm, but in the process of getting what they want, if they happen to harm people or they predict they're going to harm people or people are saying you're harming me right now, they don't care the way that other people do. There's a lot of variance here. The way that the internet talks about these individuals, they typically will use the term a narcissist, which isn't accurate, but the way that people talk about psychopaths is cartoonish, and it's much more complicated and nuanced than that. It's not like they're incapable of caring or they are always harming and always sadistic. So, just understand that. But there is a personality profile, and I'm going to do a whole deep dive on this at some point. I hopefully in the next 6 months. I talk about psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder and narcissism and dark tetrad and dark triad and antisocial and sociopathy. I talk about all those things a lot because y'all will ask questions about it. And it is an area of my work and my expertise and my work as a supervisor and a professor. And yet I've never done a deep dive on it before, which is kind of strange. It's just been that there have been other things that have taken priority. So with these individuals, they will at times, often actually at times, will be complained about by their parents as people that lie a lot because they don't care. One of the reasons why kids and teens do not lie, contrary to what people often think that kids and teens don't lie because of the rules, because of structure, because they're worried about consequences. And they are, and that is one of the factors. But clinically speaking, what I have found is at least 90% of the reason why kids and teens either lie or don't lie is because they care and have a connection with authority, their parents and teachers and this sort of thing. Whereas when there's a breakdown in that relationship between the authority figures, parents and teachers and whatnot, and the child or adolescent, then for a lot of those kids, there's no incentive to tell the truth anymore. There's no incentive to play ball or follow any of the rules. So there's that. But for some individuals, even though the parents are doing a good enough job, the kid has developed some problem. Now, usually, if not always, the research, it's hard to know because we can't nail down the exact cause of any personality type. But anecdotally, what I will say is that I've never treated a psychopath or someone with antisocial personality that did not go through not only trauma as a child, but significant trauma. Now, it might not have been noticeable to the individual, meaning that the mistreatment happened 0 to 3 or even 0 to 2 or something. But once looked into, there's significant reasons to believe that a high level of mistreatment happened, neglect, harm, abuse, this kind of stuff. Anyway, I'll just throw that out there. I'm not saying anything about Dave, but I will always, as I'm having thoughts, share, and I'll tell you what I'm saying as a jumping off point, because presumably that's why you watch this channel. I say all that because I'm not just saying that to cover my ass, because of like a lawsuit or something, which I'm not worried about. I'm saying that because I really do not want anyone to misunderstand me and believe that I am diagnosing anyone or even minorly suggesting a diagnosis for any of these individuals. Because when I assess, especially something like psychopathy, I have the luxury typically of assessing people over weeks or months. When I have done forensic work, I might only have 5 to 20 hours, but still that's a lot more than this, right? And I have concentrated testing and interviewing and I talk with people. This is just me passively watching an edited TV show, so who knows? But I'll just say that, we'll keep it in mind.
Okay.
But he also, at the end of the day, he'll want things to be good.
Yeah.
What was your sister's advice for you coming on this?
She wasn't super thrilled.
Okay.
I think she even said that. She was just like, I don't think any of those girls are good enough for you. Like,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, like, it's, it's my life.
Right.
I will say that if we hadn't seen in the edit some of the red flag, yellow flag moments, a lot of his behavior and demeanor is within normal limits. He asks good questions. He listens. His responses seem in tune with other people. So I want to be clear about that. He and Lauren are talking about their families and their childhood. From my understanding, from my contact on the show, at the beginning of every day, the showrunner in the morning, he will sit down in each of the lounges and do a pep talk. And it can be kind of long at times. It's not just like a couple of minutes. It can, I don't know, 15, 30 minutes or something. I don't know. And I think the purpose is to try to get people comfortable and icebreakery and to give them ideas about what to talk about that day. And so he will say, okay, here are a set of questions, write them down, or they'll give them a handout and they write them down in their book or something. And so sometimes the questions that they're asking are actually prompted by the showrunner, and each individual in the date and all the dates are at the very least expecting to ask and have those questions be asked of them. And I think it's also a way of giving people permission to ask more in-depth, more vulnerable questions, right? I think the showrunner knows that if he doesn't prime the pump, then people will just stay kind of surface. So I wonder if on this day they were primed to ask very specific questions about family and childhood, which I think is a great idea. So we're learning from Dave that he had one sibling and that Lauren had three, and that Lauren's older brother has always been a protector of her. I don't know what that entailed. It sounded not pathological, it sounded just regular, but who knows. Dave has one sibling. We didn't learn that before. An older sister. He says that she is motherly, and sounds like he is saying that his mom and his older sister raised him. So I don't know if that has to do with the mom struggling with cancer. I would imagine that at least plays some role, but I don't know. Meaning that the mom might have been incapacitated for a time. At the very least, she died, right? And the older sister might have taken on that responsibility or always kind of had it. I don't know. And then regarding coming on the show, he says, well, let's rewind that.
So at the end of the day, he'll want things to be good.
Yeah.
What was your sister's advice for you coming on this?
She wasn't super thrilled.
Okay.
I think she even said that she was just like, I don't think any of those girls are good enough for you. Like,
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a family member or a friend being concerned about someone coming on this show. I think particularly if you've never watched it, because when I first heard about this premise, I thought that's unlikely to work. And, reality TV, it's all edited and exploitative. And I'm not saying it's not exploitative and not edited, but I have since learned from watching this show and keeping stats on the individuals that have become married and stayed married, and some of them have kids. There's at least 3 kids that have been born from those relationships. I don't know if those relationships are any good, but they seem on the up and up. So if I had a friend or a family member that said they're going on Love is Blind and they were into it, I would be fully supportive of it, because I would have some advice about how to advocate for themselves and how to watch out for things, given my understanding of what happens on these shows. But I would be happy based on the premise that they're going on the show because they are interested in finding the one. And I've already gone over the stats that if you're just cast on this show, you have a 13% chance of getting married to someone. 1 in 8 of these individuals actually make it to the altar, and there's a yes, yes. So, it's not great odds, but it's enough of a chance to justify the bother, you know what I mean? To tell you the truth, I would also heavily caution someone of going on reality TV, because you just don't know how you're going to come across. You're just handing yourself over to the editor, and you could be painted as a villain even though you weren't. So I would have a long talk about that. I would have a long talk about how the showrunners can manipulate and whatnot. So, I would caution against that. But point is that for Dave's older sister to be hesitant or not supportive of him going on the show, that's neither here nor there. It's understandable if people don't understand, even if they did understand the show, right? Anyway, but then he says that she specifically, it's always interesting what people present, right? Because the interactions that he had with his sister around coming on Love is Blind were probably varied and numerous. There was probably a lot of things said, a lot of vibes and communications. It might not have been extensive, but it was more than just one or two sentences in all likelihood, right? And we also know that what the sister intended to communicate might not have been what was communicated. Also, we know that what he received as communication might not have been accurate. Also, the memory encoding and then the recall. But at the very least, what he presents in this moment, it can say something, not only about the relationship with his sister, maybe about his sister, maybe about him, right? Because I've been putting a lot of things in a set of columns. The way he words this, he says that his sister says, "I don't think any of those girls are good enough for you." That's an interesting statement, right? Now, maybe the sister, for whatever reason, literally thinks that to be true or has a misunderstanding of what the show is or the sort of people that go on the show. I don't know, but it's all just speculation upon speculation. If she did communicate something like that you're better, those aren't at your level, then we wonder what messages have been given to him overall from the sister as an attachment figure, as an authority, someone that is motherly to him, or what sort of narrative was being given to him in the family, for example. I don't know. Who knows? And or this is what he's presenting, but she, the sister, was actually saying a lot of things, maybe in addition to this, but maybe not even this. Maybe the sister would say, if she were to watch this show, she would say, "I never said that. I would never say that to him. I wouldn't say that these women aren't good enough for him. What I remember saying is da-da-da." But because of his personality or his filter or his bias or what he wants to put forward or something, that's what he remembers and or that's what he's saying right now. Who knows? But I just thought I'd throw it out there. You can socialize people to become self-centered and self-aggrandizing. It's not the typical personality disorder type of narcissism, because if, for example, you have someone that was raised well enough, but you teach the child that they're better than everyone else, then that notion can cause a lot of problems because that's what they've been taught. But it can be dismantled fairly easily because the foundation of the personality is such that they have self-awareness potential and they have care for other people, and they don't have the need to be superior because they were raised well enough. So they fairly easily will discard the notion that they're better than others once they're presented with information to the contrary. Whereas people who are heavily mistreated, typically neglected growing up in the first number of years of life, they believe they're superior, not because they were necessarily taught it, but because they need it to be true. Because if they don't establish to themselves that they're superior and don't establish to other people that they're superior, then they are left to their deeply held belief that they are not only worthless, but invisible and irrelevant, which is not only hurtful and painful for the individual, deeply, deeply painful, but also terrifying. It is terrifying to believe and know or suspect that you just don't matter at all, inherently, because of who you are. Therefore, no one loves you because they can't love emptiness, and no one will help you, no one will save you, no one will attach to you, no one will care about you. Not only because you're worthless, but you don't exist. Literally, that's what is happening for these individuals. I'm not saying that's what he's going through. All right, well, if you don't know, I switched from doing Cameo to doing my own thing because the Cameo app on an Android was completely useless. It was glitchy to the point where it was impossible to use. So I started my own Cameo-like thing called Kirkgrams that's on our website. So if you want to get a video, a personalized video of me saying happy birthday or happy anniversary or something, then go to the website. I'm actually charging a lot less than I was before because, Cameo is taking a cut, and so now I can just cut the middleman. Cameo is great. I'm not going to denigrate them, but the app, I just don't understand. But anyway, if you're interested in that, then that is available. Otherwise, it's not for everybody. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.